Hello everybody. Let us go to the second chapter of embedded system, that is architecture of an embedded system. Any general, typical, basic embedded system will be discussed under this chapter. Elements of embedded system will consist of hardware, software, real-time operating system, etc. Hardware will be power supply circuit, any processor, the memory, timer and communication ports, then application circuits and all will be there in the hardware. Software can be an application software. That means depending upon the task, the application that you are carrying out in this embedded system, you will have different software. Real-time operating system will manage both software and hardware, wherein it will help to switch from one program to another and enabling and scanning the hardware units. Then coming to the block diagram of embedded system, there is going to be core, which is the central part of an embedded system. Core can be a microprocessor, microcontroller, application specific integrated circuit, or digital signal processor, or it can be an FPGA also. FPGA means field programmable gate array, which will consist of a memory into which program will be burnt, so that that program will represent a circuit. Like that, there could be a core. Then there will be input port and the output port. Input port will consist of sensors which will receive the input. Output port will consist of actuators which will bring out corrective measures or actions will be taken up based on the input that is received. Memory will be of two types, that is data memory and the program memory. Data memory will receive the input as well as will receive the results, whereas the non-volatile memory will have the embedded firmware, that is the software which is burnt permanently and kept in the non-volatile memory. Then communication interface will be nothing but bus. It can be an address bus or a data bus or an control bus. So this bus will be internally connecting various units, also connect the external units. Then coming to the other supporting ICs, can be A to D converter, D to A converter, watchdog timer, brownout reset circuit, real-time clock. Like that, there can be different supporting circuits and the subsystems. So these are all the elements of an embedded system to constitute complete functional unit of an embedded system. Among the elements of embedded system core is the central unit. So herein, as a system core, you can use different devices. Let us see what are all the devices that are used as system core. One, microprocessor. Microcontroller is the second one. Digital signal processor, application specific integrated circuit, that is ASIC. You can use programmable logic device, that is PLD. Commercially off the shelf components such as COTS. Microprocessor provides only the central processing unit. That means it will provide ALU plus control unit, timing unit plus the internal registers. So microprocessor provides only limited internal units. Rest of the units you have to add and develop a microprocessor developed embedded system. If you go for microcontroller is integrated with central processing unit plus memory plus IO ports plus other control units like memory controller, interrupt controller, etc. So microcontroller as a core, if you use, you need to have less additional ICs. Then digital signal processor can be used as a system core, wherein digital signal processor will do complicated mathematical computations, because it is required some sophisticated mathematical calculations to process the digital signal. So digital signal processor performs many mathematical operations upon signal. So you can use digital signal processor or DSP as a core in such embedded system where digital signal is handled. Then application specific integrated circuit, otherwise ASIC, is a system core which is designed for the requirement for a specific purpose, which can be called as a customized system core. That means it will only meet the narrow, specific, definite use of an embedded system. Then programmable logic device is actually a memory device. What it does is, it is going to have array or group of gates inside. It is a memory device wherein a program will be converted into machine code and burnt into it, so that an electronic circuit can be synthesized within the programmable logic device, which can be used. COTS means commercial off-the-shelf component, where these units will be developed for some specific purpose. If the embedded system developer needs the use of this, he can directly purchase and introduce into his embedded system. They are actually the licensed version of units which are readily developed and kept in the store. You can purchase it and use it in your embedded system as the core. So these are all the devices which are used generally as the system core devices. Now we'll see the difference between microprocessor and microcontroller. Microprocessor is a stand-alone. That means it will only provide the CPU. Other ICs you have to add, such as memory ICs, controller ICs, they all have to be added to this. Whereas microcontroller is a single chip integrated with processor plus memory plus IO ports and some control functionalities. So that is the first difference between microprocessor and microcontroller. You can design your own memory here because you are additionally connecting it. Whereas in microcontroller, you cannot have your own memory being designed. Whatever is provided, integrated, that you have to directly use it. In microprocessor developed system, it is heavier and expensive because all the units you are going to assemble. So then it will be expensive also because separately you are buying the ICs. Here it is lighter and also economical because many units are integrated into it. So you will buy it for a less expensive cost. Then power consumption is more here because all the units are assembled here. Here power consumption is less because units are integrated. Any particular unit go fault here can be separately replaced, but here entire IC has to be replaced because all the units are integrated within the microcontroller IC. Then this is more pipelined. That means more instructions can be queued up for execution and subtasks can be overlapped for execution of different instructions. But here pipelining is allowed, but less pipelining you observe in microcontroller. And then bit processing instructions are less. That means you cannot have more instructions to process upon individual bits of a data. Here you can have more instructions to process or act upon individual bits of a data in microcontroller. Then lastly, this is general purpose and this is specific purpose. These are all the differences between microprocessor and microcontroller. We can see the other system core devices. Coming to the digital signal processor or DSP. It is the special purpose processor with the data width of 8 or 16 or 32-bit. Digital signal processor can process audio video communication signals. They are actually fast, and the algorithms or the programs will be implemented in the hardware. So DSP is a microchip designed for computational operations upon the signal. A typical digital signal processor consists of the internal units such as program memory. Program memory is used for burning in of the firmware. So data memory is the memory used for storing of temporary variables and processing of data or signal being done on the data memory. Then coming to the computational engine, this is the heart of the digital signal processor. This naturally consists of arithmetical unit, hardware shifters, etc. will be there to assist the computations of the digital signal processor. This unit exists. Then coming to the I/O unit, this actually is an interface unit. This interfaces DSP with the external world so that it can capture signal inputs and deliver out the process signals. As I told you already, digital signal processor finds application in audio and video signal processing, employing the real-time calculations. Real-time calculations in the sense fast Fourier transformation, discrete Fourier transformation, such mathematical involved computations or calculations are done to carry out the digital signal processing. Coming to the application specific integrated circuit, ASIC, which can also be used as a core in an embedded system. An ASIC is a microchip. It is designed for unique and specific purpose. The cost is quite less because several functions are integrated into a chip. And then ASIC can be made by any company. They can manufacture and sell in their own trade product name. Then ASIC will be called as ASSP, that is application specific standard product. It occupies less space, it will have more capability, and it can provide more functionality. Therefore ASIC will be very helpful as a core in an embedded system. Example for an ASIC could be a chip used as a voice recorder for satellites. You can use logic devices as the core in some of the embedded system. But if you use just the logic devices, it will not allow you to alter your circuits and programs. So you go for programmable logic devices which will allow you to design your own electronic circuits or digital circuits, develop it in the form of programs and convert it into machine code, download it into the memory device. So PLDs are actually the memory devices which will allow you to download the program. You are going to use some software tools to develop your own hardware description language programs. Simulate it. That means you are going to check it in the system. Later on test the design by implementing that electronic circuit or the digital circuit in the memory device. There are two types of PLDs: complex programmable logic device, that is CPLD, and field programmable gate array, that is FPGA. FPGA is used in data processing, data storage, instrumentation, telecommunication, etc. The FPGA provides more features and it provides highest performance, more logic density. That means you will have more gates per unit area of the chip in FPGA. Whereas CPLD is used in mobile phones and digital organizers, but this provides lesser gates. Up to 10,000 gates is provided by the complex programmable logic device. Both FPGA and CPLD are available from Xilinx company. FPGA is called as the Vertex in the Xilinx company. Xilinx company is producing FPGA as Vertex. CPLD is produced by Xilinx in the name of Cool Runner. And then you can use advantages of PLD are it offers more flexibility, ready to be shipped. That means you can easily transport from one place to another and allows to program. So PLD allows you to program, otherwise logic devices generally won't allow you to program. So this is a programmable logic device which is more flexible and you can use it for specific purpose to be incorporated in an embedded system. Now coming to the commercial off-the-shelf components which are called as COTS. These COTS are readily available in the market to be used. They would have been designed in such a way that suppose you have got a system, embedded system, you want to bring in or insert, adopt certain unit, let us say, you can directly walk into the market, select any one of this component available in the store and you can come and insert it into your embedded system. Such are the commercial off-the-shelf components which are the core components of an embedded system. Examples are UV or IR detectors, that is ultraviolet and infrared detectors, radio frequency circuitry, A to D converters. These are the examples of commercially off-the-shelf components. They are readily available in the market. Then mainly TCP IP plugin modules are available in the market from the manufacturers such as Winsnet, Freescale and Dynalog, etc. Let us see the different type of memories used in the embedded system. Mainly there are two types. One is read-only memory, the other one is read-write or random access memory. Both are important because read-only memory is a permanent kind of memory in the sense you are going to burn in a software into this. That software which is burnt permanently into the memory is called as the firmware, which is one of the important section of an embedded system. Whereas user can enter his variables and see the output developments in the read-write or random access memory. So mainly read-only memory and read-write memory are the two major types. First one among the read-only memory is the masked read-only memory. This memory comes with the program right from the factory. That means industrially it is programmed. Once you have burnt in the program into the read-only memory, you cannot alter once you purchase and accommodate in your embedded system. So this is factory programmed kind of read-only memory. This is programmable read-only memory in the sense you can once program it, which is called as OTP, that is one-time programming. So both are one-time programming kind of memory only. The difference is this comes along with programs being burnt in the memory right from the factory, whereas read-only memory you can get it blank read-only memory, and once you program it, it remains permanently in that memory. Then erasable programmable read-only memory. In fact, there will be ultraviolet window given on the IC surface of the read-only memory. By exposing it to the ultraviolet rays, internal information can be erased. Then you can reprogram it again. You can burn in a new program of your own choice into the read-only memory. Hence it is called as erasable programmable read-only memory. This provides a little bit of flexibility compared to the previous two. Electrically erasable programmable read-only memory in the sense you are going to use electrical signals to erase the read-only memory. Electrical power is used to erase the information rather than EPROM, where ultraviolet rays were used here. Here you are going to use electricity to erase the program already available and burn in or enter new information or new program into the read-only memory. So both provides flexibility. Here it is more flexible because you don't need any ultraviolet rays window and all. Electrically very easily you can erase it. Then flash memory. Flash means very quickly. This memory once again is just like electrical erasable programmable memory only. The difference is the memory is arranged in blocks. So memory is sectionalized as blocks. So blocks together can be at a time erased in the flash memory. Hence it is called as flash. Then random access memory is also available in the non-volatile type, which is called as NVRAM, wherein the data information that is available here won't be erased because there will be battery backup. But still, this is not so popular in the section of the read-only memory. Then non-volatile RAM can also be sectionalized or classified under read-write or random access memory. So coming to the read-write and random access memory, herein you can enter temporary variables or the parameters that are required for the user, and the embedded system will process and give back the feedback or the output to the random access memory, which can be read or utilized by the user. There are two types of static RAM and dynamic RAM. Static RAM will involve more of NMOS, PMOS kind of transistors. So flip-flops kind of arrangement is done in static RAM. So it stores the information in the form of voltage. So RAM can retain the information longer because it stores the information in the form of voltages. Whereas dynamic RAM are made out of the capacitors. So information stored will be in the form of charges. Those charges over a period of time, there is a possibility and tendency of charge being leaked out. So every now and then you need to refresh the RAM. So here in the form of voltages and flip-flops, here in the form of capacitors, information is stored in the form of charges. Coming to the dynamic RAM. The structure of a dynamic RAM will be like this, wherein there is a storage capacitor and there is a MOSFET transistor, NMOS transistor. The storage capacitor is used as a cell to store the charges, and those charges will represent the information. Because the information is stored in the form of charges, there is a possibility of leakage or draining out of the charge value from the capacitor. So information needed to be often, frequently, you have to refresh it. So that is the disadvantage of a dynamic RAM. That's the reason why it is called as dynamic RAM also, because frequently you need to refresh the cell of a dynamic RAM, that is capacitor. And address line will enable this transistor. Transistor acts like a switch to connect the storage capacitor to the bit line to read or to refresh the capacitor. So this is how the dynamic RAM works. Now let's compare between static RAM and the dynamic RAM. As we have already seen in the structure of static RAM, we had 6 MOSFETs. Whereas in the dynamic RAM, 1 MOSFET has a switch and 1 capacitor to store the charge for the storing of information. So that way requirement of components are more, the 2 transistors in the static RAM. Refreshing is not required in static RAM because we have already discussed that voltage is the information that is stored in the static RAM, and voltage will not be lost quickly, so you need not refresh it frequently. Whereas in the dynamic RAM you need to refresh it continuously because capacitor keeps losing the charge and you need to recharge it or refresh the information that is stored in the form of charges. Static RAM will have low capacity because every cell consists of 6 MOSFETs and you cannot accommodate so many components in a memory chip. So you tend to have lesser memory locations, or low capacity memory will be the static RAM. High capacity, because one cell is just one capacitor and a MOSFET, you can fill up more cells. So high capacity of memory can be had in dynamic RAM. Expensive because 6 transistors are required to form each cell, so static RAM is expensive. Dynamic RAM is not so expensive because only capacitor and a single MOSFET is required to form a memory cell. And because transistors are there, their access time is very less and it works very fast. Whereas in the dynamic RAM, it is bit slow with the 60 nanosecond of the access time. So these are the differences between static RAM and the dynamic RAM. Sensors and actuators are also the important components of an embedded system. Sensor will be at the input of an embedded system to receive physical quantities such as light, pressure, temperature, etc., which are converted to electrical signals which act like a transducer. So these electrical signals are applied to the core for further processing. So examples for sensor are electrodes in an electrocardiograph, where heartbeats are sensed by the sensor and converted into electrical signals. Actuators will be there in the output. Any corrective measure or the physical action that is required to be taken, then actuators will be utilized. Actuators will receive the electrical signals from the core or the processor. If there are any variations in the input signals compared to the set values of the user, then actuators need to take physical action or the corrective measure. If no physical action or corrective measure needed to be taken up, then actuators are not actually required. Instead, you can use monitors or display system. Example for actuators is a smart cooling system used in a room. If there are any temperature variations and not comfortable for the user compared to the set standard values of the user, then actuators can increase the cooling system or decrease the cooling system to bring the temperature into the comfortable value. Like this, sensors and actuators work in an embedded system. Let's go to the communication interface of an embedded system. Communication interface is nothing but channels or the buses for communication of the data. The communication of information will consist of address, data, control signals, etc. Onboard communication interface is actually used for connecting internal units of an embedded system. External communication interface will involve connecting the embedded system with the external world. Among the onboard communication interface, we have got I2C, that is, it will connect IC to IC. It is a two-wire communication system. It is off duplex and bidirectional. That means, though bidirectional, at a time only one direction of data communication can take place in the I2C type of interface. Coming to the SPI, it is synchronous. That means it is based on the clock and it is having four wires in the communication system, and it is fully duplex. That means to say it can communicate in both the direction simultaneously. Coming to the UART, Universal Asynchronous Receive Transmitter. Because it is asynchronous, it is not clock frequency based, but the two devices communicating have to match with respect to bits per second, parity, that is number of ones in the data, and number of start and stop bits have to be matched between the data that is sent from between the two devices. Coming to the one wire interface, it has got only wire, only a single wire. I2C had two wires, SPI had four wires, whereas one wire will have, as the name itself indicates, it has got only one wire for communication. Of course, it is off duplex and asynchronous. That means clock is not used, and then in only one direction data communicate at a time. Parallel interface means number of bits that are there in the data are equal to the number of wires that are there in the bus interface. So coming to the external communication interface, we have got RS-232C and RS-485. RS indicates recommended standard. RS-232C is a full duplex, wired, that means physical connection is there for this type of interface. Asynchronous, serial communication interface it is. It uses connectors like DB9 or DB25. That means so many pins will be there in the connectors that are utilized in the RS-232C. It does point-to-point communication. The two devices connected will be called as data terminal equipment, that is DTE, or data communication equipment, that is DCE. So DTE and DCE are the two devices which are called being connected through RS-232C. RS-485 is an enhanced version of this, whereas this supports multi-drop communication up to 32 transmitting device up to 32 receiving device. So 32 transmitting and 32 receiving devices are interconnected with by the help of RS-485, which is the improvised version with regard to the RS-232C. Universal synchronous bus. Universal serial bus. Universal serial bus is once again a wired bus. It has got high speed for communication. It can host up to 127 connections, which are very popular among the user. Then coming to the IEEE 1394, it is called as a FireWire because it does communication very fast. It carries blocks of data asynchronously. So therefore only FireWire can communicate in a high speed manner. Then coming to the infrared. It will infrared rays are nothing but the rays which will carry the information in the form of electromagnetic spectrum. So the two devices have to be placed in the line of sight distance. So the range is very less. It follows serial off duplex. Off duplex means at a time in only one direction data communication can take place. Coming to the Bluetooth, it is also a low cost, low power, short range wireless communication. Infrared was also wireless, and Bluetooth, all the five of them remaining in this category are wireless communication. So this again, Bluetooth is short range wireless. It carries data and voice. Bluetooth operates at 2.4 gigahertz and radio frequency it follows. It supports the data rate at a speed of 1 megabits per second, and it can communicate maximum in a range of 30 feet when the two devices are placed. Then coming to the Wi-Fi, it is also called as wireless fidelity. It is a wireless communication once again. You can have networked devices for the more than one device, more than two devices, a group of devices can be interconnected through Wi-Fi. Herein, you have to have IP addresses for each of the device that is in communication. And it operates at a range of 2.4 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz of radio spectrum. And then it supports 1 megabits per second to 15 megabits per second, and this can support a range, an interdistance among the devices being 100 to 300 feet. Then coming to the Zigbee, this again is a low power, low cost wireless communication. It is used for wireless personal area network. You can create a network among the devices by the wireless method. It works in the range of from 2.4 to 2.484 gigahertz in one range. Another range is 902 to 928 megahertz. There is one more range, 868 to 868.6 megahertz. So in three different bands, Zigbee will be able to work in the radio frequency. And then it supports 100 meters interdistance among the devices for communication. And the data rate is 20 to 250 kilobits per second. That means the speed of the communication is little bit slow. Coming to the GPRS, General Packet Radio Service, this is the phenomena or the concept by which mobile communication will take place. A mobile will have their GSMs through which the communication is interconnected. This supports data speed from 171.2 kilobits per second. So it is mainly used in the mobile kind of embedded system. So these are the different communication interfaces available generally in the embedded system. Let's get to know some of the timing circuits of embedded system. Among them, reset circuit or power on reset circuit. Herein, signal is applied to the reset pin of the embedded controller. By applying reset, the embedded system starts executing its firmware from the foremost location of the program memory. Normally the vector address will be 00 like that. So you can either produce active high reset signal or active low reset signal. It will be a combination of the passive components like capacitor and resistor. Herein, active high signal is generated by taking the reset pulse across the resistor, because when you apply VCC, capacitor needs some time to charge up. Meanwhile, resistor will be dropping very high voltage, so that you will have a high value at the pulse. After some time, the capacitor charges to the optimum value, then resistor will have no voltage across it, so there will be a drop in the signal. So the width of this pulse depends upon the product of the values of R and C. Here the reset pulse is taken across the capacitor. So initially it is low because the time required for the capacitor to charge up will depend upon the values of R and C. So capacitor will slowly charge up to the maximum value. So it is initially low, then it will go high. So it is the active low pulse that you generate when you take the pulse across the capacitor. Here you have got a diode working as a flyback diode, or you can call it as a snubber diode, or you can also call as a freewheeling diode. These diodes will actually disallow the surge or the spike that may happen in the pulse that is obtained at the output. So that is how the reset circuit will work. Now let's get to know the brownout protection circuit. The use of brownout protection circuit in an embedded system is that when the voltage falls below a reference voltage, the embedded system will enter a reset state and remain in the reset state till the voltage that is applied exceeds the reference value. Here you have got VZ, that is Zener diode providing VZ, so that a constant reference voltage is provided. The transistor conducts only when VCC exceeds the sum of VBE and VZ. So as long as the voltage is lesser than this VBE and VZ, that is the applied voltage is lesser than the reference voltage, transistor remains off. When the transistor remains off, reset pulse will be active low because it is connected to the ground. When the applied VCC goes beyond or above VBE plus VZ, that is above the reference voltage, then the transistor conducts, then VCC is connected to the output so that it is not active low, it is active high, so it comes out of the reset and it starts functioning. So as long as VCC is lower than the reference, reset pulse will be maintained. Once the VCC exceeds the reference, then reset pulse is removed from the active low and the embedded system starts functioning. Let's get to know the real-time clock of an embedded system. The real-time clock provides the current time in hours, minutes, seconds, either in 12-hour or 24-hour format. Date, month, year, days of the week are updated in the embedded system, and it has to have a battery backup. Real-time clock can interrupt the operating system at regular intervals to update the present time. That is how the real-time clock assists the embedded system. Get to know the watchdog timer of an embedded system. Watchdog timer is a hardware unit which monitors the execution of the firmware in an embedded system. Watchdog timer will count the system clock using its counter. Before the watchdog timer could arrive at the last count, if the embedded system fails to complete the execution of the firmware, then watchdog timer tends to think there is a error in the execution of firmware, and the watchdog timer will reset the embedded system by applying the signal on the reset pin. Watchdog timer can be externally connected or it can be inbuilt. If it is inbuilt, there will be status register provided by the watchdog timer, which is required to be initialized by the embedded controller to follow up the execution of firmware by the inbuilt watchdog timer. If the watchdog timer is externally connected, then watchdog timer will have its internal logic circuit by the help of which it follows up the execution of firmware. If it finds any mistake, it will reset the embedded system. So this is how the watchdog timer works in an embedded system. Finally, we have come to printed circuit board and passive components in the second chapter of embedded system. These are also important components of an embedded system. Once you decide upon the circuit, what you have to do is you generate a schematic design and then you do the fabrication to create a printed circuit board. Printed circuit board is like a platform on which you mount all components. Passive components like capacitor, resistors have to be mounted, and diodes have to be mounted. Then various chips of embedded system have to be mounted to make ripple free voltage supply as well as the spike suppressing operations. So for all other rest of the purposes, we are going to have PCB and passive components as the essential part of the embedded system. Hereby I conclude the overview, a brief revision of the architecture of an embedded system.